It was 11 p.m. on this starry evening, and the mansion was a tad empty apart from the incuriously content gardener, two happy chefs who always had meals prepared, and an aging maid who never asked questions. The vacancy, however, did not last for long, as the rumble of the large SUVs routinely made their way into the rear of the estate. The automated garage outside opened and a little chime went off in the kitchen. Scurrying, the two chefs hurried to their places to prepare dishes. The mansion was quiet until the doors to the garage swung open and the sounds of men chattering and boots hitting the ground filled the very large room. The men were heading to this room that looked to hold wonders of entertainment. Inside was a mounted 80-inch flat screen, a surround sound system that was mounted to the ceiling, 6 game consoles behind a glass case, a leather couch that wrapped around half of the very large room, a pool table and a few tall metal tables with matching bar stools. Just to the left of the larger room was the dining hall, which was also connected to the kitchen. There were 23 men in total in the living room who were all nonchalantly making themselves at home. They were all different in height, but nonetheless equally heavily built. Their dark grungy clothing made them look slightly out of place compared to the very neat manner. In the living room, 6 men sat at the metal table playing dominoes or cards. A couple others seemed to continue a game of pool that was left idle before they returned, and the rest were either sitting on the couch playing a game or preparing to clean their rifles. One man in particular, named Marco, was leaning on the wall next to the pool table watching the game when he grew curious about something. After a few minutes of pondering to himself, he spoke aloud. "Hey, did you guys see where the boss went? I want to know if I can leave to do something." One of the men playing pool replied without looking up. "Ask him to leave? Yeah, good luck with that." He paused for a moment to locate the nearest striped ball and took his shot. Marco stayed quiet and stared blindly at the 8 ball. "Did you see what he did before we left?" added the man. Marco thought to himself for a second and argued. "Well, isn't he always like that? Come on, man, I just need to go see my ma. She's not doing too good, and we just got paid, so—" "Hey, I'm just saying." The man innocently brought his hands to his chest while holding the pool stick and added, "I wouldn't ask him nothing right now. You don't even know if we're done yet. We're on call all the time now. It ain't like last year. Things changed real quick, real fast, and seeing how it is, boss must be real busy too." Defeated, Marco looked away and stared at the TV. The sounds of the first-person shooter echoed in his mind and reminded him of what he was told just moments ago. "Did you see what he did before we left?" Marco shifted his weight uneasily. He stared at the bewildered plump man a yard away from him, but his mind was elsewhere. The man to Marco's right leaned in a bit close and asked almost silently through his mask, "Hey, do you think the dude's got men posted round here?" The question pulled Marco back to earth, and he adjusted his mask, then answered quietly, Probably. A guy dressed like that has gotta be covered. We just have to be ready like always." The musty warehouse was dark inside, apart from the jagged hole in the ceiling that allowed the glow from the night sky to permeate through. It shone like a spotlight upon a plump man tethered to a metal chair. He was fidgeting and heavily breathing until he noticed a pair of shiny black Oxfords slowly appear in front of his feet. "Let me go, and you'll get your end of the cut, I swear it," begged the plump man nervously. Funny how business can work itself out, eh, Chipper?" inquired a cold voice sarcastically. The face on the plump man turned bright pink, and he began to breathe heavily once again. Suddenly, a piercing cackle bounced off the walls of the warehouse and startled the pink-faced man. After a few seconds, the cackling calmed to an eerie, low chortle, and the black Oxfords backed out of view. All that could be heard were the clicking of footsteps on the cold cement floor. The man in the chair looked around frantically and cried out, Wait, I'll give you my end of the cut too. And a few of my guys, trained marksmen. Deal?" "And how will you make this happen, my dear Frankie?" replied the cold voice from the shadows. "I'll make a call. I just need to make a call and it's all yours." The plump man named Frankie looked around anxiously. A few minutes passed. The icy voice returned to ask, "Phone?" Left pocket," Frankie quickly replied. A dark-gloved hand with silver-studded knuckles appeared from the side of the pink man and reached its way into his pocket. "You know," said the shadowed figure whilst digging for the phone, "I'd normally take you out first, but we're in a bit of a rush." Frankie, still pink in the face, gulped as the gloved hand quickly withdrew the phone from his pocket. Just hold down the side button on the left and it'll speed dial. A few moments of silence passed, and then a small beeping noise sounded off from the phone. I'm guessing that button wasn't a speed dial, inquired the shadowed figure calmly. You son of a bitch! You're nothing! Thinking you could just climb to the top with no hard work just because you're young? You're a dead man! Screeched Frankie. The shadowed figure chuckled and promptly threw the phone against the wall, scattering the remains into the darkness. After a few moments of silence, the cold voice returned briefly. Fellas? Immediately, sounds of clicking and shifting echoed from the darkness. Frankie began to breathe heavily as he heard a set of footsteps approaching him from behind his seat. Suddenly, Frankie was dragged out of view from his spotlight, the metal chair loudly scraping the cement along the way. The shadowed figure effortlessly dragged him to the corner of the warehouse, next to the armed men lined against the wall. In the next moment, the double doors of the warehouse slammed open, and men with rifles piled in. The whole warehouse was abruptly filled with light and deafening gunfire. The noises ceased only after a few long minutes, and the musty air began to fill with smoke. The warehouse was now dimly lit from the breach, along with the new holes in the walls created by the gunfire. All 23 of the men still lined against the wall remained unharmed and idle. With widened eyes, Frankie remained still in his chair. He was frozen at the sight of his men lying life asleep in front of the breach. I'm going to have to teach someone a lesson or two about lying, the chilled voice taunted. The shadowed figure suddenly came into view from behind him. He was a 6-foot man, lean but slender, and his features could vaguely be made out in the still smoky and dim house. Frankie looked up at the tall man, and his eyes grew wider by each second. Oh, don't look at me like that! You'll make me blush! Snickered the tall man playfully. His voice startled Frankie, as it was surprisingly no longer the icy voice from earlier. The man swung around Frankie and effortlessly yanked him forward to the center of the warehouse once again. Lesson 1, said the man sternly. How to permanently rid yourself of lying. The tall man pulled out a shiny pocket knife from his trousers and shouted, Open up, Frankie! Frankie shook his head frantically and pleaded, No, please, I have a daughter and 2... And I have a botanist who mows my pretty lawns. Frankie, I don't care about your daughters. I care about you! The tall man sighed to himself and immediately grabbed Frankie's face. Gotta do everything myself, don't I? Growled the man to himself. He was now prying Frankie's mouth open with his gloved hands and grabbed a hold of his tongue with his left index finger and thumb. His right hand flung the shiny pocket knife open, and Frankie began to squirm hysterically beneath him. You're making this much more difficult than it has to be, grunted the tall man, who then planted his left foot on the thigh of the squirming man beneath him. Once he secured his grip, the tall man promptly began slicing away at the tongue between his fingers. Blood gushed from Frankie's mouth and he began to gag. There we go. See? That wasn't too bad. Laughed the tall man, who abruptly tossed the lifeless meat onto the floor with a splat. What? Why do you look so sad? Oh no, okay? Lesson 2. The man grabbed Frankie's face once again and placed his knife at the corner of his already crimson mouth. Say cheese! Yelled the man, and the warehouse was promptly filled with hoarse cackling and faint grunts. The tall man then backed away from Frankie, who was now staring blindly at the cement beneath him. The corners of his mouth were hacked open to the middle of his cheeks, and his jaw remained open involuntarily. The tall man began to pace, and suddenly threw his knife to the wall, where it landed next to the remains of the scattered phone. I don't think you've learned your lesson yet, old man, returned the chilling voice from earlier. The men standing by the wall all watched calmly as they waited for their commandant to finish his business. Marco had his eyes fixed on the piece of meat lying on the floor. He shifted his weight again uneasily and looked back at the tall man, who was now hastily walking back up to the unfortunate person in the chair. Without a word, The man grabbed Frankie's bottom jaw with his right hand and grabbed his upper palate with his left and tore away at the flesh until a cracking noise was heard from beneath him. He backed away once again and took a deck of cards out from his trench coat, staining it with his bloodied hands. He chucked the cards at the still man in the chair and muttered coldly to himself, "No deal." The man faced away from the men along the wall and walked right under the glowing opening in the ceiling. The man's hair appeared to be dark green in the glow, and strands of hair were sticking out messily from all directions. He rose his still bloodied hands to his head and smoothed his hair back to its original place, leaving his green hair stained with red. He signaled his men and began to make his way out of the breach. Marco followed, along with the rest of his cohorts, and slowed as he passed by the lifeless man in the chair. What was once a pink-faced man was now a crimson jumble of flesh. His lower jaw dangled from his throat, and the rest were facing the opposite direction. The passing men all slowed to look at their boss's masterpiece as well. Marco looked down and saw all the scattered cards on the floor that read Joker, with different depictions of jesters on each one of them. "Hey, you gonna eat?" asked a voice from behind. Marco shook his head as if he were shaking out his previous recollection. Yeah, he reassured, still a bit uneasy from what he had witnessed earlier. "Man, things really aren't like last year,"